On Tuesday morning, I received a message from Marcus. At first, I almost ignored it. Marcus and I hadn't spoken in years, and the preview just showed my name followed by a question mark. I figured it was some old contact cleaning thing, or maybe he was trying to reconnect out of the blue. But then I opened it. Hey, I don't know if you heard. Ethan died last night. I read it again, then again. It didn't feel real. Somehow, it still felt like he still existed out there. I typed back before I really knew what I was asking. What happened? 5 minutes felt like 5 hours as I stared at my phone. Then, I saw the typing bubble. They're saying suicide. That was it. I sat there for a long time after that. Ethan and I hadn't spoken in almost 6 years. Not properly, anyway. There had been the occasional message from him, a text every now and then, a Facebook notification where he tagged a few of us in something. I hadn't replied to most of them. It wasn't because I hated him, nothing like that. It was just easier not to. Especially when I knew what the conversation would eventually turn into. It always did. The last message he'd sent me was about 8 months ago. I remember it clearly because I stared at it for a long time before deciding not to respond. Do you remember exactly what happened that day in the woods? No hello, no catching up. Just that. I closed the message and told myself I'd respond later. But I forgot. Marcus sent another message a few minutes later with the funeral information. It was happening that Saturday back in town. I almost didn't go. The idea of driving back there after so long made my stomach knot up in a way I couldn't quite explain. But something about the message Marcus had sent kept sticking with me. They're saying suicide. Something about that didn't sit right. It's not like Ethan didn't seem happy or stable or anything like that. The truth was, I had no idea what Ethan's life looked like anymore. But the Ethan I remembered wasn't someone who would just quietly disappear. If anything, he was the one who refused to let things stay buried. Especially that. Saturday came faster than I expected. The town looked smaller than I remembered when I drove in. Streets that had once felt wide and endless now seemed narrow and oddly quiet. Stores I remembered were gone or replaced by things that didn't belong there. The church was exactly the same though. Same brick walls, a crooked sign out front with changeable letters. Cars lined the gravel lot when I pulled in. For a moment, I just sat in my car with the engine off. I almost turned around and left. Instead, I got out. Inside, the place smelled faintly like old wood and flowers. Quiet conversations echoed softly under the high ceiling. Most of the people there were older than I remembered. Parents, teachers, neighbors. People who had known us when we were kids. I spotted Marcus sitting near the back of the room, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of a dark jacket. He looked older than I remembered. He saw me and gave a small nod. I walked over. We stood there awkwardly for a moment before either of us spoke. "Hey," he said. "Hey." Marcus glanced toward the front of the room where the closed casket sat surrounded by flowers. "Claire's here," he said after a moment. I followed his gaze. She was sitting in one of the pews near the aisle, shoulders slightly hunched, staring down at her hands. Her hair was shorter than I remembered. When she looked up and noticed us, she gave a small, uncertain wave. Sam was standing a few rows behind her. He looked the least changed out of all of us. Same posture, same skeptical expression, like he'd just been told something he didn't quite believe. When he saw me, he lifted his chin in a greeting. The four of us hadn't been in the same room together in over 10 years, not since the summer before high school started. Back when everything still felt simple, back before we all agreed to stop talking about what happened. No one mentioned it now. We stood together near the back while people filtered in and found their seats. Conversations between us stayed small and safe. Work, where people lived now, how long it had been since we'd been back in town. Claire kept glancing toward the casket like she wanted to look but couldn't quite bring herself to. Marcus didn't look at all. Sam eventually crossed his arms and leaned against the wall. "Anyone hear what actually happened?" he asked quietly. Marcus just shook his head. "Just what I texted you guys." Sam frowned slightly, but didn't comment further. Claire spoke next, her voice softer than I remembered. "He messaged me last month." That got everyone's attention. "What about?" Marcus asked. Claire hesitated. Then she said it. "The woods." A strange silence fell over the four of us. Sam sighed almost immediately, like he'd been expecting that answer. "Of course he did." Claire looked at him. "He asked if I remembered exactly what happened that day." I felt their attention shift toward me. For a moment, I considered lying. Instead, I just nodded. "Yeah," I said. "Me too." Marcus just looked down with avoidance. None of us spoke after that, because, in truth, we all knew why Ethan had been contacting us, even if none of us wanted to say it out loud. After the service ended, people drifted slowly out of the church in quiet clusters. Handshakes, muted condolences, that strange heavy politeness that follows funerals where everyone speaks softer than usual. The four of us stood near the parking lot for a while, unsure what to do next. Claire was the first to say something. "There's still that diner by the highway, right?" Marcus nodded. "Yeah, it's still there." Sam shrugged. "Might as well." We all seemed to understand the same thing at the same time. None of us were ready to go home yet. We drove separately and met there 20 minutes later. The diner looked exactly the way it always had. Same faded red booths visible through the window. Even the same bell over the door that gave a dull jingle when you stepped inside. It felt strange walking into a place that hadn't changed when everything else had. We slid into a booth near the back. Marcus and I on one side, Sam and Claire across from us. For a few minutes, the conversation stayed careful and surface level. Claire had moved to Denver a few years ago, worked in graphic design. Marcus stayed closer to home than the rest of us, construction jobs mostly. Sam lived in Chicago now, doing something with software that he described in vague terms, and no one really pressed him on it. I talked about my job just enough to keep the conversation moving. In that moment, it was clear that if we ran out of small talk, the topic would gravitate back towards what we'd been avoiding. Eventually, Sam asked a question that had been sitting there the whole time. "Marcus, when was the last time you talked to Ethan?" Marcus leaned back slightly, rubbing his thumb along the edge of his coffee mug. "In the last few years, he only messaged me about one thing." The words seemed to settle over the table like dust. Nobody spoke. Marcus continued after a moment. He asked if I remembered exactly what happened. Sam looked at him, unimpressed. Seriously? We were 12, he added. Kids make stuff up. His tone carried the kind of casual dismissal that meant he didn't want the conversation going in that direction. Marcus shook his head immediately. No, he said. Sam raised an eyebrow. No what? No. Something happened. The way Marcus said it made the booth feel smaller. Claire shifted uncomfortably in her seat. We all remember something, she said quietly. That's not the same thing as it being real, Sam replied. Marcus looked at him. You remember digging, right? Sam sighed and leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. Yeah, he admitted. I remember digging. Claire spoke again. It was behind the old logging road. I felt something tighten in my chest as the memory surfaced. We used to ride our bikes in the woods behind town during the summer. It was a stretch of forest that began just past the last row of houses and stretched for miles. Old trails, half-collapsed tree stands, rusted signs from logging operations that had shut down years before. We found something buried out there. Sam rubbed his face with both hands. Jesus, he muttered. Claire looked up at him. You remember it too. Sam didn't respond right away, but he didn't deny it either. For a moment, the only sound at the table was the faint clinking of dishes somewhere behind the counter. Marcus looked at each of us in turn. You remember what we said after? Claire nodded slowly. Sam stared down at the table. I didn't say anything, because we all remembered that part clearly. The four of us and Ethan, standing in that clearing with the dirt piled around a hole we dug, terrified, confused, and agreeing on one thing. We would bury it again, and we would never talk about it. Ever. The coffee in our cups had gone cold, but no one seemed to care. We seemed stuck in our own heads. Around us, the diner started filling up with the late afternoon crowd. The quiet clatter of dishes and low conversation drifted, but it all felt strangely distant. Marcus was the one who finally broke the silence. What do you actually remember? He asked. He wasn't looking at anyone in particular when he said it. Sam leaned back in the booth. What do you mean? You know what I mean, Marcus said. That day, what do you remember happening? Sam gave a tired laugh. Man, that was 20 years ago. Yeah, Marcus said, but do you remember it? Another pause settled over the table. Then they all looked at me. I hadn't realized until that moment that I'd been avoiding thinking about it. Even hearing the woods mentioned earlier had brought back only fragments, shapes without details, feelings without context. But when Marcus asked the question directly, the memory came back all at once. Not clearly, but enough. I stared down into my coffee and said, It was summer. Sam rolled his eyes a little. That narrows it down. No, I said. I mean, it was one of those really hot days. All 5 of us biked out there, Ethan in front because he was the fastest, Marcus and Sam arguing about something behind him, Claire riding next to me. The logging road had already been half reclaimed by the forest back then, tall grass growing through the gravel, branches leaning over the trail so you had to duck under them. We ditched the bikes where the road ended and walked the rest of the way. I could see it clearly now. The clearing. Ethan was the one who spotted it first. "There," he said slowly. "That patch of dirt." Claire looked up immediately. "You remember that too?" I nodded. There was this spot where the ground looked like it had been disturbed, like something had been dug up and filled back in. The dirt wasn't packed down the same way as the rest of the forest floor. The grass hadn't grown back properly. It looked like someone had buried something recently. Even back then, we knew it. Ethan had walked over and kicked at it. "I remember that," Marcus said quietly. "He started digging," I continued. None of us had tools, obviously. We were 12, so we used sticks, branches, our hands, anything that could find purchase. The dirt came up easier than it should have, packing under our fingernails. Sam shifted in his seat. "Yeah," he said. "We were digging for a while." I nodded. Then, we hit something. I could still remember the dull clunk as Ethan's stick struck something hard beneath the dirt. We cleared the soil away until we could see part of it. "It was metal," I said. Sam frowned immediately. "No, it wasn't." I looked up at him. "Yes, it was." "No," he said firmly. "It wasn't metal." Claire leaned forward slightly. "What do you mean?" Sam rubbed the back of his neck. "It was wood." The three of us stared at him. "Wood?" Marcus asked. "Yeah," Sam said. "Like a crate or a box or something." "That's not what I remember," I said. "It's what it was," Sam replied. He leaned forward now, more animated. "It had boards, like old boards, and there was a symbol carved into the top." "What symbol?" Claire asked. Sam hesitated. "I don't know, something weird, like a circle with lines through it." I shook my head slowly. "There wasn't any symbol." Sam gave a frustrated laugh. "Dude, yes there was." Marcus held up a hand. "Wait." We looked at him. "You both might be wrong." Claire blinked. "What?" Marcus leaned back slightly. "It wasn't metal, and it wasn't wood." "So, what was it?" Sam asked. Marcus hesitated. "Stone." The word hung there. Marcus continued. "Like a slab, part of something bigger underground." Claire sat very still. "That's actually closer to what I remember, but not right." Sam threw his hands up. "Okay, that makes zero sense." Claire ignored him. "I remember Ethan brushing dirt off something flat," she said slowly. "Like a lid." "Exactly," Marcus said. Sam shook his head. "No, it was a crate, I'm telling you." I tried to picture it again, the object beneath the dirt. But the more I thought about it, the less certain I felt, because the memory that stood out the most wasn't the object itself. It was the sound. "We heard something," I said. Claire nodded immediately. "Yes." Sam frowned. "What sound?" I looked between them. "A knocking sound." Marcus tilted his head slightly. "What?" "Like something hitting the inside of the thing," I said. 3 or 4 dull taps. Knock, knock, knock. Claire shook her head slowly. "That's not what it was." "Then what was it?" I asked. Claire's voice dropped when she answered. It was breathing. Sam scoffed. No, it wasn't. Yes, it was, Claire insisted. She looked at me. It was slow, like something was breathing under the ground. I felt a chill move through me. Marcus had gone very quiet. Finally, he said, "You're both missing something." Sam leaned back again. "Oh, here we go." Marcus didn't respond to the sarcasm. "You're all remembering the digging," he said, "and the sound. But that's not the part that stuck with me." Claire looked at him. "What part?" Marcus took a slow breath. "The part before we left." None of us said anything. Marcus looked at each of us in turn. "You remember we left the woods, right?" "Obviously," Sam said. Marcus nodded. "Yeah, but something happened right before that." Claire frowned. "What do you mean?" Marcus looked down at the table. Then he said quietly, "Ethan, talk to it." The words seemed to pull the air out of the booth. Sam stared at him. "No, he didn't." "Yes, he did," Marcus said. I felt my stomach tighten. "What do you mean he talked to it?" Marcus rubbed his palms together slowly. He leaned down into the hole. He paused, thinking about how to phrase what he was about to say. And he said something. "What did he say?" Claire asked. Marcus shook his head. "I don't remember exactly." Sam laughed nervously. "You're seriously saying Ethan had a conversation with a hole in the ground?" Marcus didn't smile. "He said something first," Marcus repeated. "And then..." Claire leaned forward. "And then what?" Marcus looked up at us. "And then..." Something answered. For a little while after Marcus said that, none of us spoke. The noise of the diner seemed louder suddenly. Forks clinking against plates, someone laughing near the counter, a truck rumbling past outside. Normal sounds, things that didn't belong next to the sentence we just heard. Sam finally broke our silence. "That's not possible," he said flatly. Marcus shrugged slightly, but there wasn't any humor in it. "I'm just telling you what I remember." Sam looked at the rest of us, waiting for someone to back him up. No one did. Claire was staring down at the table again, fingers tracing circles on the laminate surface. "That's not the part I remember," she said quietly, "but I do remember something else." She reached into a bag and pulled out a phone. "Ethan had been messaging me for months." Marcus nodded. "Same here." Sam frowned. "About the woods again?" Claire unlocked her phone and scrolled through something before turning the screen towards us. It wasn't just the woods. It was a conversation thread with Ethan. Most of the messages were short, sent days or sometimes weeks apart, but they all had the same tone. Questions. Claire pointed at one near the middle. "Did we bury it again?" Another a few lines down. "Did we actually close it?" Further down the thread. "Do you remember what it said?" Sam shifted in his seat. "That doesn't mean anything," he said, though his voice wasn't as confident as before. Marcus pulled his phone out next. "He sent me the same kind of stuff." He opened one of the conversations and slid the phone across the table. More questions, short, direct, almost frantic. "Are you sure we covered it back up? Did you hear it too? Think about it carefully. Do you remember what it said?" I felt a tightness building in my chest. "Did he ever say why he was asking?" I said. Marcus shook his head. "Not exactly," he hesitated, then added, "But he did say something else." "What?" Claire asked. Marcus looked around the table before answering. "He had been going back out there." Sam frowned. "Out where?" "The woods." Claire blinked. "Recently?" Marcus nodded. "Last few months." Sam scoffed weakly. "Why would he do that?" Marcus didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned forward slightly. "The last message he sent me," he said, "wasn't a question about our memories." "What was it?" I asked. Marcus looked down at his phone again. Then he read it out loud. "What if we didn't bury it? What if it buried itself again?" No one said anything for a moment after Marcus read the message. It just sat between us. Outside the diner window, the sky had started turning that dull grey colour it gets before evening. The parking lot lights flickered on one by one, casting long reflections across the glass. Sam rubbed his face with both hands. "This is ridiculous," he said eventually. "We're sitting here trying to piece together 20-year-old memories because Ethan sent a few weird texts." Marcus didn't respond. Claire was staring at Ethan's messages again. "What if he wasn't just remembering things wrong?" she said quietly. Sam looked at her. "What do you mean?" Claire set her phone down on the table. "What if he was trying to figure something out?" Sam let out a short laugh. "About what? Some imaginary box we dug up when we were 12? Marcus leaned forward. "You heard the messages." "Yeah," Sam said. "I heard them." "And?" Marcus asked. "And people get weird when they're dealing with stuff," Sam replied. "Maybe he was depressed. Maybe he got stuck thinking about something from when we were kids." Claire shook her head. "That's not what this feels like." Sam opened his mouth to argue again, but she kept going. "He asked if we buried it again." She looked at each of us. "What if we didn't?" Sam scoffed. "Of course we did." "Are you sure?" she asked. Sam hesitated, only for a second, but it was enough. Claire leaned back slightly in the booth. "Marcus said Ethan had been going back out there." Marcus nodded. "More than once." The diner suddenly felt too warm. I found myself staring at the condensation on my water glass, watching a drop slowly slide down the side. Claire spoke again. "We should go look." Sam let out a disbelieving laugh. "You're serious?" "Yes." "For what?" he asked. "Closure?" Claire didn't answer right away. Then she said, "Ethan's parents gave me something after the service." She reached into a bag again and pulled out a small wooden container. It took me a second to understand what it was. Sam's expression shifted when he realized. "You're saying we scatter his ashes out there?" he said. Claire nodded once. "It seems like something he would have wanted." Sam leaned back again, staring at the ceiling for a moment. "This is insane," he muttered. Marcus didn't look convinced either, but he didn't object. Instead, he asked, "You mean tonight?" Claire shrugged. or tomorrow morning. Sam was quiet for a long moment, then he sighed heavily. Fine, he said. Everyone looked at him. But only so we can finally stop talking about this, he added. We go out there, scatter the ashes, see there's nothing there, and we move on. Claire nodded slowly. Marcus gave a small shrug. Works for me. Their attention drifted toward me. I hadn't spoken since Claire first suggested it. The thought of going back to those woods after all this time made something twist in my stomach. But the truth was, I'd been thinking the same thing since Marcus mentioned Ethan returning there. If Ethan had gone back, if he'd been digging again, then maybe the thing we buried wasn't just a half-forgotten childhood story. Maybe it was still there, waiting. I swallowed and nodded. Okay, I said. We'll go. We decided to go the next morning. No one said it outright, but I think all of us preferred daylight for what we were about to do. We met just after 9 in the same gravel lot behind the diner. Claire had the small wooden container with Ethan's ashes tucked carefully into a bag. No one commented on it, but everyone noticed. From there, we drove the rest of the way out of town. The roads felt narrower than I remembered. Houses that once seemed far apart were packed closer together now. A few new developments had crept out toward the edge of the woods, but the forest itself still loomed behind them the same way it always had. Dark, dense, and quiet. We parked near the old logging road. The gravel path was still there, though it looked more overgrown than before. Tall grass had swallowed most of the tire tracks, and thin saplings leaned over the trail where trucks used to pass. For a moment, none of us moved. Then Marcus opened his door. Guess this is it, he said. We stepped out into the morning air. It was cooler beneath the trees, the sunlight breaking into thin strips through the canopy. The smell of damp earth and pine needles hung in the air, sharp and familiar. I hadn't been back here in nearly 20 years, but my body recognized it immediately. We followed the old road on foot, the gravel crunching under our shoes. Sam walked ahead for a while before stopping and turning around. Was it this way? He asked. Marcus looked uncertain. I think so. The deeper we went, the more wrong everything started to feel. The woods seemed smaller. When we were kids, the place felt endless, like you could walk for hours without seeing the same tree twice. Now, the forest felt tighter somehow, the spaces between things shorter, the trails narrower. Branches scraped against each other overhead in the breeze. Claire slowed to a stop. I don't remember this part, she said. Marcus glanced around. Yeah, the trail shifted. He stepped off the main path slightly, scanning the trees. This used to open up somewhere around here. Sam kicked at the ground. Great, he muttered. We're looking for a random spot in the forest we haven't been in since middle school. Marcus ignored him. Instead, he walked a little further into the trees, pushing aside a low branch as he moved. Then, he stopped. Wait. The rest of us followed. Marcus pointed ahead through the trees. You see those? At first, I didn't understand what he meant. Then I saw it. 3 tall pines growing unusually close together, the trunks twisting slightly around each other near the base. Something about the shape stirred a distant memory. Marcus nodded slowly. Yeah, he said. That's it. Claire stepped forward. Are you sure? Marcus moved toward the trees without answering. We shadowed behind his curiosity. Just beyond them, the ground dipped slightly, opening into a small clearing no bigger than a backyard. I stopped as soon as I saw it, because even after all these years, I recognized the place immediately. This is it, Marcus said quietly. No one disagreed. For a moment, we stood there, taking it in. The clearing looked smaller than I remembered, just like the rest of the woods. The grass was patchy, thin in places where sunlight struggled to reach through the canopy. But the center of the clearing was impossible to miss. The ground was darker, uneven. Claire stepped forward slowly. Was it always like that? She asked. I shook my head. No. Marcus crouched down near the center. He didn't even have to brush the dirt away to see it. The soil was loose, recently disturbed, like someone had been digging there not long ago. Marcus stayed crouched near the center of the clearing, slowly dragging his fingers through the loose dirt like it was testing it. It's fresh, he said. Sam frowned. Fresh how? Marcus lifted his hand. Dark soil clung to his fingertips. This hasn't been like this for long. I stepped closer. Now that I was standing over it, the shape of the ground was obvious. Someone had dug here recently. The earth was piled unevenly around the center, the way dirt looks when it's been shoveled out and pushed aside in a hurry. But the hole itself wasn't open anymore. The middle had sunk inward, like whatever had been dug out had collapsed back into itself. Claire noticed something first. Wait, she said. She walked a few steps to the side of the clearing and bent down. When she stood back up, she was holding an empty beer can. Ethan didn't drink, Sam said automatically. Claire turned the can in her hand. The metal was dirty and slightly dented. Someone did. Marcus stood up and started looking around the edge of the clearing. He didn't have to look long. Here, he said. Leaning against one of the trees was a shovel, or what was left of one. The wooden handle had snapped cleanly in the middle, leaving the metal blade half buried in the dirt where it had fallen. The pale wood inside hadn't darkened yet. Sam walked over and picked up the broken handle, turning it in his hands. So, someone came out here, dug a hole, broke a shovel and just left, he said. Marcus didn't answer. He had already stepped back toward the center of the clearing. The shallow pit was easier to see up close. Someone had definitely dug there. The dirt around the edges had been thrown outward in rough piles, and the middle had sunk into a dark hollow where the soil had collapsed inward, like the ground had given way after the digging stopped. Marcus crouched again. Ethan was here, he said quietly. No one argued. Sam crossed his arms. Okay, he said. Let's say he was. That still doesn't mean... Marcus suddenly leaned forward. Wait. He brushed the patch of dirt aside with his hand. Something black was sticking out of the soil. At first, I thought it was a piece of plastic. Then Marcus pulled it free. It was a phone. The screen was cracked and dirt filled the edges of the case. But it was unmistakable. Claire stepped closer. That's his, she said. Marcus turned it over slowly in his hands. The phone was caked with dried mud, like it had been dropped directly into the hole while someone was digging, or while something else was happening. Sam stared at it. "You're telling me he just left his phone out here?" Marcus didn't answer. Instead, he pressed the side button. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the screen flickered weakly to life. Marcus stared at the screen for a moment. The phone had turned on, but the battery icon flashing in the corner told the rest of the story. 1%. Then the screen went black again. Sam exhaled through his nose. Great. Marcus pressed the button again. Nothing. "It's dead," Claire said quietly. Marcus looked around the clearing, then back down at the phone. "Not necessarily." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small power bank with a charging cable wrapped around it. Sam gave a short laugh. "Of course you brought that." Marcus shrugged. "Habit." He crouched again and brushed more dirt off the phone before plugging the cable in. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the screen lit faintly. A charging symbol appeared. Everyone leaned closer without meaning to. Marcus set the phone carefully on the ground between us. "Give it a minute," he said. So we waited. The woods were quiet in that strange way forests get when the wind stops. Not silent exactly, just muted. The occasional creak of branches shifting somewhere deeper in the trees, a bird calling far off in the distance. But the clearing itself felt strangely still. Sam paced a few steps away, kicking at loose dirt. "This proves he was here," he said. "That's all." Claire didn't answer. Her eyes stayed fixed on the phone. Marcus crouched beside it, arms resting on his knees. I noticed he kept glancing at the shallow pit beside us, like he was expecting something to change while we waited. I tried not to look at it. After a few minutes, the phone vibrated softly. The screen came fully to life. Marcus picked it up and unlocked it. The lock screen was cracked badly, but it still responded. He opened Ethan's files. There weren't many recent ones, just a handful of photos, and one audio recording. The timestamp showed it had been made 5 nights ago. Marcus looked at us. "This has to be from when he was here." Sam crossed his arms again. "Then play it." Marcus hesitated for a second. Then, he tapped the file. The recording started with a soft rush of static, then the sound of dirt moving, shoveling, and metal blades scraping through soil. The rhythm was uneven, as if Ethan had been digging quickly, then stopping to catch his breath. For a while, the only sounds were that and the forest around him. Heavy breathing, dirt shifting, the dull thud of the shovel hitting something harder beneath the surface. Claire's hand moved to her mouth, because we all recognized that sound. Marcus turned up the volume slightly. On the recording, Ethan stopped digging. There was a pause. Then his voice, breathless and excited. "I found it again." The 4 of us looked at each other. The recording went quiet. For several seconds, there was nothing except Ethan breathing into the phone microphone. Then, something else. A faint movement, a scraping sound under the dirt, like something shifting beneath the ground. Sam frowned. "What is that?" No one answered. On the recording, Ethan moved closer to whatever he'd uncovered. His breathing grew louder, closer to the microphone. Then he spoke again. His voice had changed, lower, unsteady. "You remember us?" The sentence made the clearing feel suddenly colder. For a moment, there was nothing. Then the audio warped slightly, like interference had passed through the microphone. A low vibration hummed through the recording, and underneath it, a voice, so faint it almost blended into the static. Marcus turned the volume up all the way. The words were barely there, distorted, but we could still make them out. "You opened the door." Claire made a small sound beside me. The recording crackled sharply. Then it stopped. For a few seconds, none of us moved. Marcus was still holding the phone out in front of him, like the audio might start playing again if he waited long enough. It didn't. The woods felt different now. I think it collectively dawned on us how far removed we were from safety. Sam was the first to speak. "That could be anything," he said quickly. His voice sounded a little too loud in the clearing. "Audio glitches happen all the time. Phones pick up weird background noise." No one responded. Marcus slowly lowered the phone. "You heard what it said," he muttered. Sam shook his head. "I heard something that sounded like words." Claire was staring at the shallow pit again. "What if we've been remembering this wrong the whole time?" she said. Sam sighed. "Claire, no, listen." She stepped closer to the disturbed ground. "What if we didn't find it?" Sam frowned. "What?" Claire looked back at us. "What if it found us?" The question hung in the air. Marcus slowly nodded. "That's kind of what it felt like." Sam looked between us like we'd all suddenly lost our minds. "You're seriously going to jump to that conclusion because of a creepy voice recording?" Marcus ignored him. "I keep remembering something," he said. He rubbed at the back of his neck. "That day when we were digging." Claire turned toward him. "What?" Marcus looked down at the collapsed pit. Ethan leaned into the hole. He was talking. "You already told us that," Sam said. Sam shifted uncomfortably, like he'd been holding something back. All this unanswered energy was breaking him down, and he was at his breaking point. Sam hesitated. Then he said something quieter. "There's something I remember too." We all looked at him. Sam stared at the ground while he spoke. "After we left the clearing," none of us interrupted. "We were all freaked out, right? Just trying to get back to the bikes." Marcus nodded slightly. "Yeah." Sam continued. "I remember we were walking down the trail in a line. Marcus in front, the rest of us behind him. That leaves Ethan last," Claire said. Sam nodded. "Yeah." He looked up at us. "And the whole way back." He paused. "Ethan didn't say a single word." Marcus frowned. "So?" Sam shook his head. "You don't get it." He pointed back toward the clearing behind us. "That kid never shut up. Even when we were scared, even when we were running, Ethan always had something to say. But that day, he just walked behind us the whole way home." Sam swallowed. Claire crossed her arms. Does that mean anything? Sam looked at her. Maybe. Then he added quietly, but he felt different. None of us asked him to explain what he meant, because in that moment, I realized something uncomfortable. I remembered that feeling too. The four of us stood around the shallow pit, the phone still in Marcus's hand, the broken shovel lying half buried beside it. The clearing felt smaller than it had a few minutes ago, like the trees had leaned in a little closer without us noticing. Sam kicked a loose clump of dirt into the hole. Look, he said, his voice tight. Even if Ethan came back here and dug this up again, that doesn't mean... But he didn't finish the sentence, because something had been bothering me since we listened to that recording. A small detail that kept turning over in my head. I looked at Marcus. When Ethan leaned into the hole, I said slowly, "You said he was talking." Marcus nodded. "Yeah." And something answered. That's what I remember. I looked at the collapsed pit again, the loose soil, the broken shovel, Ethan digging 5 nights ago, finding it again. A strange thought began forming in the back of my mind. At first it felt ridiculous, the kind of idea you immediately push away because it doesn't fit how the world is supposed to work. But the more I tried to ignore it, the clearer it became. Claire noticed the look on my face. "What is it?" she asked. I hesitated. Then I said it. "What if we've been thinking about this the wrong way?" Sam let out a tired breath. "Please don't say something like it's cursed or haunted or... What if we didn't just find something buried?" I said. That got his attention. Sam frowned. "What do you mean?" I gestured toward the hole. "We always talked about it like we dug something up, like we uncovered something that was already there." Marcus was watching me closely. "And?" he asked. I swallowed. "What if that's not what happened?" The words felt strange even as I said them. What if we opened something instead? Claire's expression shifted. "You mean like a container?" I shook my head slowly. "No." Something colder than the morning air moved through me as the thought finally locked into place. Like a door. No one laughed, no one even argued, because we had all heard the same words on Ethan's recording. You opened the door. Sam stared at the pit. "That's not..." But he stopped again, because suddenly something else made sense. Something Marcus had said earlier. Ethan leaning down into the hole, listening and talking. Marcus spoke quietly. "If it was a door," I finished the thought for him, "then something could have come through." The clearing fell silent again. Sam shook his head, but the movement looked weak. "That's insane." "Is it?" Claire asked. She nodded toward the phone still in Marcus's hand. "We heard something talking." Sam didn't answer. Marcus looked down at the disturbed earth. "Ethan kept coming back here," he said, "over and over." Claire hugged her arms around herself. "Maybe he remembered something we didn't." A memory surfaced suddenly in my mind of the way Ethan had stayed behind us the whole time. Quiet. I felt a slow, creeping realization settle over me. We had opened something, and whatever had been inside hadn't stayed there. It had followed us out of the woods, followed us all the way back to town. But not with all of us. Just one. I looked at the others and finally said the thing none of us had considered before. It didn't stay in the ground, I said. My voice sounded distant in my own ears. It came with us. Claire's eyes widened. Marcus went very still. Sam whispered, "What are you saying?" I looked down at the pit, then back toward the trail that led out of the woods, toward the life Ethan had lived for the past 20 years. "We let something out," I said. No one spoke, because the rest of the thought had already reached all of us at the same time. It hadn't followed Marcus or Claire, Sam or me. It had chosen someone else, someone who had leaned down into the hole, someone who had spoken back. Ethan. The idea sat there between us, heavy and impossible to move around. Sam shook his head slowly. "No," he said under his breath. "No, that still doesn't explain why he..." He stopped. Marcus looked up. "Why he what?" Sam gestured vaguely toward the town behind the trees. "Why he killed himself." The word sounded wrong the moment he said it, because suddenly, looking at the disturbed earth in front of us, it didn't fit anymore. Claire said it first, very quietly. "What if he didn't?" Sam frowned. "What?" Claire nodded toward the pit. "He came back here." Marcus glanced at the broken shovel, the empty beer cans, the phone buried in the dirt. Then he looked at the hole again. Understanding crept slowly across his face. "Oh," he said. My stomach dropped, because the same thought had already hit me. Ethan hadn't come out here to remember. He had come back for one reason: to finish something. I looked at the collapsed pit, the ground that had been dug open and then closed again, like someone had tried to force it shut. The realization landed all at once. Ethan hadn't killed himself. He had come back to the woods, back to the place where we opened it, to put it back. Sam finally broke the silence. "So that's it," he said. "He just came out here and tried to bury it again?" Marcus didn't answer. Claire slumped her shoulders in defeat. "It doesn't make sense," she said quietly. "What doesn't?" Sam asked. "If it attached to him," she said, "why come back here at all?" No one had an answer to that. We'd come to a logical dead end, having exhausted all our testimony and found evidence. With barely a word, we'd decided to head back to somehow process all this in future therapy sessions. We'd almost reached the edge of the clearing when all 4 of our phones vibrated at the same time. The sound was so sudden it made Claire jump. Sam pulled his phone out first. "What the?" Marcus was already looking at his screen. I checked mine. We had all received the same message. From Ethan. For a moment, none of us moved. The timestamp said the message had been sent 5 nights ago, but the delivery notification just read now. Marcus looked back toward the trees behind us. "No signal in the clearing," he said slowly. Claire nodded. Once we started walking, the message had finally gone through. Sam stared at the screen. "It's a video." Marcus took a moment for resolve and just said, "Put it on." Sam opened the message and turned the phone so we could all see. The video started shaky and dark. For a moment, it was just Ethan's flashlight beam moving across the trees. He was walking. You could hear leaves crunching under his shoes and his breathing in the microphone. Then he flipped the camera around. Ethan looked older than when I'd last seen him, thinner. His eyes looked tired, but there was something else there too. Relief. "Hey," he said to the camera. His voice sounded hoarse. "If you're watching this, it means I finally figured it out." He glanced over his shoulder into the trees behind him before continuing. "I know you guys probably think I've been losing it for the last few months." A faint smile crossed his face. "Honestly, I thought so too for a while." He walked a few more steps before stopping, the beam of his flashlight tilted downward. Dirt, the edge of a hole, the same clearing we were just standing in. But Ethan looked back into the camera. "It took me 20 years, he said, "but I finally understand what we found that day." He hesitated, then shook his head. "Actually, that's the first mistake. We didn't find it." His voice dropped slightly. "It found us." The woods were silent around us as we watched. Ethan continued. "It doesn't move, not really. It doesn't crawl out of the ground or chase people through the woods or anything like that." He looked down at the hole again. "It spreads through memory." A slow chill ran through me. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. "The day we dug that thing up, we all saw it. That's how it attaches." He looked back at the camera. "Seeing it is enough." Sam shifted beside me, but none of us looked away. Ethan continued. "The difference is you guys stopped thinking about it. You buried it." His expression tightened slightly. "I couldn't." He glanced toward the woods again, like he expected something to be standing there, listening. That's why it stuck with me. Then Ethan said something that made my stomach drop. "And that's why I kept messaging you." Marcus whispered. "Jeez." On the video, Ethan nodded slightly like he could hear him. "I wasn't trying to catch up," he said. "I was testing something." He took a slow breath. "I needed to know if you still remembered." The flashlight beam shifted as he moved the camera slightly. "You see, it gets stronger when people remember it together. Every time someone thinks about it, every time someone talks about it." He gave a tired laugh. "So every message I sent you, every time we tried to remember what happened that day." He shook his head. "We were feeding it." No one spoke. The video continued to play in the quiet woods. Ethan looked straight into the camera now. "That's the real problem. It doesn't want out of the ground." He gestured toward the hole behind him. "It wants out of us." On the screen, Ethan turned the camera slightly, angling it toward the hole behind him. The beam of the flashlight lit the disturbed earth, the same patch of ground we were standing beside now. "For a while," he said, "I thought the only way to stop it was to forget." He let out a quiet breath. "But that's not how it works." The camera shifted as he crouched near the edge of the pit. "I tried," he continued. I stopped coming out here. I stopped thinking about it. He gave a small, humorless smile, but it didn't stop thinking about me. None of us moved as the video played. Ethan brushed dirt away with the side of his hand. I kept hearing it again, he said, in my dreams when I was awake. His voice had gone lower, calling. He looked back into the camera, and then I realized something. The flashlight beam dipped toward the ground again. It's tied to this place, the hole. He gestured toward the disturbed soil. As long as this spot exists, the memory has somewhere to live. So, it came back. To finish it. He reached behind him and grabbed the shovel lying in the dirt. The metal edge scraped against the ground as he dragged it closer. I'm going to dig it up again, he said. Everything. Then he nodded towards something off camera, and I brought enough fuel to burn the rest. Claire sucked in a quiet breath beside me. Ethan looked back at the camera one last time. If the place is gone, the memory won't have anything to attach to. The video jolted as he set the phone down on the ground nearby. The camera angle tilted sideways, showing the edge of the pit and the dark outline of the trees beyond it. Then, he started digging. Shovel biting into dirt, soil shifting, heavy breathing between each movement. For nearly a minute, no one spoke in the video. Ethan just kept digging. Then, the shovel struck something. A dull, hollow clang echoed through the phone's speaker. Ethan froze. On the video, he leaned forward slightly, peering down into the hole. His breathing had slowed. I can hear it again, he said quietly. A faint distortion flickered through the audio. At first, it sounded like wind brushing against the microphone. Then, something else. A voice, so quiet it almost blended into the static. The words were impossible to fully make out, just a low whisper under the noise. Ethan's shoulders shifted. Then he shook his head sharply. No, he said. The whisper continued. Ethan leaned closer to the hole. You don't get them. Only me, he said firmly. For a second, the camera picked up a deeper vibration in the audio. Then the video cut to black. Tom's phone was still held out between us, the dark screen reflecting our faces back faintly. The woods around us felt unnaturally still, like everything had paused to let the last thing Ethan said settle in. Marcus was the first to look away. He stepped forward slowly, back to the clearing, the dry leaves under his shoes crunching louder than they should have. His eyes drifted back toward the collapsed pit in the middle of the clearing. When he reached the edge of the hole, he crouched down again. The broken shovel blade was still lying there where we'd found it earlier. Marcus picked it up. For a second, he just held it, staring into the loose dirt. Then, he started digging, like he already knew what he was going to find and didn't want to rush getting there. The metal edge scraped against the soil as he pulled it back toward himself. Dirt shifted and slid inward where the ground had collapsed earlier. Sam watched for a moment before finally saying, Marcus. But Marcus kept going. Another shallow scoop of dirt pushed aside. The rest of us moved closer without meaning to. After a few seconds, the color of the soil started to change. At first, I thought it was just the lighting under the trees. Then Marcus paused and brushed the dirt aside with his hand. The ground beneath it was darker, almost black. Charred. Marcus wiped his palm against his jeans and dug again, pushing more of the loose soil away. The smell hit a second later, faint but unmistakable. Burnt wood. Claire stepped closer. "Oh," she whispered. Under the thin layer of fresh dirt, the ground was completely blackened, like it had been scorched. Pieces of something brittle and dark broke apart as the shovel edge touched them. Burnt wood fragments. Sam crouched beside him now. "Jeez," he muttered. Marcus uncovered another section. Something metallic caught the light. He pulled it free from the soil. The metal was twisted and warped, blackened by heat. The edges curled in strange directions like it had melted and hardened again. Marcus stared down at it for a long moment before slowly setting it aside. Then he brushed more dirt away with his hand. Everywhere beneath the loose earth was the same. Black soil, burned debris, ash worked deep into the ground. It wasn't the kind of damage you get from a small fire. Whatever Ethan had done here, it had burned hot enough to scar the earth itself. Claire's voice came quietly behind us. "He didn't just dig it up." Marcus shook his head slowly. "No." He looked down into the pit again, at the charred soil, at the fragments of whatever had once been buried here. Standing there in the clearing, looking down at the blackened ground where something terrible had once lived, I realized something that made my chest tighten. Ethan hadn't been trying to prove we were wrong. He had been trying to save us. Marcus was still kneeling at the edge of the pit, the broken shovel blade resting beside him. The charred earth beneath the dirt looked darker now that we'd uncovered more of it, like the ground itself had been permanently stained. Claire stepped forward quietly. She reached into a bag and pulled out the small wooden container. For a second, she just held it there, turning it slightly in her hands. No one asked what she was doing. She opened it. A thin grey dust shifted inside. Ethan. Claire walked to the edge of the pit. She didn't say anything, no speech or goodbye. She simply tilted the container forward. The ashes drifted down into the blackened soil, disappearing into the same burnt earth Ethan had carved open a few nights earlier. Marcus lowered his head slightly. It felt less like a funeral, and more like finishing something Ethan had started. The ashes had settled into the blackened soil, blending with the charred earth until there was no clear line between them. The clearing looked ordinary again now that the digging had stopped. Just another patch of dirt beneath the trees. Eventually, Marcus stood up. "Guess that's..." Sam started, but the sentence faded out before he finished it. We turned toward the trail. Marcus took a few steps, then stopped. "Wait." We all looked back at him. He was staring at the pit again, his brow furrowed like he'd just remembered something important. "What did it look like?" he asked. Claire tilted her head. "What?" "That thing," Marcus said, gesturing vaguely toward the hole. "The thing we dug up." Sam opened his mouth, then paused. I tried to picture it, the object under the dirt, the shape we'd uncovered when we were 12, the thing Ethan had spent 20 years thinking about. But the harder I tried to focus on it, the more the details slipped away. Sam frowned. I don't remember. Claire crossed her arms, staring into the pit. It was something, she said slowly. Metal? Marcus asked. Or wood? Sam said. Claire looked at her hand. No, that's not right. None of us could explain why. The shape was gone, the sound too. Even the voice we'd just heard on Ethan's recording felt distant now, like a dream you can only recall the feeling of. Something had happened here once, something bad, but the details had already started to dissolve. Marcus looked down at the burned ground one last time, then he nodded slightly, like he'd just accepted something. We left the clearing. The walk back through the woods felt shorter than it had that morning. None of us talked much. There wasn't really anything to say. About halfway down the trail, a strange thought crossed my mind. I couldn't remember why we'd come out here. I remembered the funeral. I remembered meeting at the diner afterward. I remembered Claire bringing Ethan's ashes. But the reason we had walked all the way into the woods, that part felt blurry now, like a story someone had told me once that I couldn't quite recall. Ahead of us, the trees began to thin. The old logging road appeared between them, and our cars waited where we'd left them. By the time we reached them, the woods were just the woods again, and whatever Ethan had saved us from, none of us could remember it anymore.